Hey everybody, this is Eric Wex, and I'm here with Jim Kelly. And yes, I'm doing the intro today because we're going to reverse things just a little bit. So if you haven't been reading it yet, I have a new serial story that is going to have 10 episodes. The first two have been published on GeekDad. It's called Gravlander. There is a Kickstarter out there for it right now, so please look up Gravlander on geekdad.com. Look for the Kickstarter, and you can help me actually get some really awesome cover art for that. But today, what we want to do is talk about episode 3, which is due to be published Friday, and that is what I'm doing today and tomorrow is I'm actually putting that together. I have transitioned, if you know plotting, I have transitioned from the setup, the premise, the call to adventure, and the debate. I've done all that stuff. And now I'm moving on to Act 2, which is where we fulfill the promise of the premise. And my argument is for writers, that is the hardest part to get right. We know what our premises are, we know what our big finale is, but actually getting the middle so that it does two things, and I'll explain what those two things are, it does two things effectively can be really difficult. So the first thing the middle does, and this is what's usually written about when you read writing textbooks, it introduces and fulfills and moves forward the emotional part of the plot. So this is where the character does their emotional growing. Is a lot of that happens in the second act, and the third act shows us the results of that emotional growth. So I've got to do all this. I've got to grow Joe up, which means I need to understand what my audience thinks Joe's journey is. And then the second piece is it also fulfills the premise of the plot. This is where the actual physical journey also takes place. The physical stuff happens. So with those two things in mind, a writer has a very difficult task when they're writing a second act to get those two on the same page. So with that, that's a long intro, James. Sorry, James. Make you sit there and stare. It's hard to do that. So with that, I want to ask James the question, who is Joe? And what is her emotional journey in the story? And I want to ask that now as reader feedback so that I can think about what my readers are hearing when they think about Joe. And what changes do you expect? What changes have I premised in the first act?
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and put on the spoilers warning here. If you haven't read,
absolutely. Yeah, if you haven't read it, go read. And then come back, and we'll talk second act, so you can figure out what it's like to plot a second act.
Right. So Eric, we have not discussed this before, so this isn't staged or plotted or anything like that. Part 1, we figured out real quick that they've been on the run for 6 years. This takes place 6 years after Rubicon.
Right.
The fleet is still together, but the text description, tells me that resources are getting thin, people are getting tired. They're at each other's throats for the smallest things. And also the other thing which I found interesting in part 1 was there's still the class. I mean, even on a starship, a fleet that is on the run, it's just like Battlestar Galactica. There are still tiers or classes. Your royalty, your military, you're not, you're down here. And so that was interesting because in part 2, all of a sudden you think, oh, these are the low, Joe and some of her friends that are picking on her for, getting accepted to medical school and stuff. They're at the bottom rung trying to work their way up. Guess what? They're not at the bottom. The Timcree are as desperate as they can be. They need medicine. So, here's the thing. I was really happy when. And it was sort of predictable, but not in a bad way, Eric. I knew that Joe was going to step up. The minute they said they needed medicine, I was like, oh, well, Joe's being trained to be a doctor, or, in the medical field. Something he's going with this.
It is something that I will learn someday, which is to really surprise my readers with my plot. But I'm so character driven that my plots tend to be very borrowed.
Right.
And that's fine. I think writers borrow a lot, right? So I borrow on my plots, but then work to make my characters lay on top of them.
It's not a complaint. It's not a weakness of the story, because it's just one of those things where it's the way the universe works. Yep. They need medicine. They need medical help. Joe happens to be the sort of character who is she doesn't know who she is, and here's an
Right.
opportunity. Here's an opportunity for her to take a jump and do something, not just different, but she doesn't know what's going on in her life. The ship is in chaos. The fleet is in chaos. Her future is unknown. But here's a group of people that say, we need someone to come back and help us administer the medicine and also take care of our medical needs. And so when she raises her hand and says, I'll go, perfect. So here's the bad part for you, Eric. There is no way to edit parts 1 and 2 and give Joe any additional incentive to go. This was sort of this was her decision. It was made just spur of the moment. I'll go. You can't go back and drop in bits and pieces that hint that is her personality. It's not her personality. I've made decisions like that. You've made decisions like that. Just all of a sudden you just go, oh, I'll do that. Spur of the moment. So the spur of the moment decision was perfect, but you are correct. Now that she's heading wherever it is she's heading, and I don't know, viewers, I have not read part 3. I get it literally about 8 hours before it's posted on Geek Dad, so I have not seen part 3 yet. I don't know where he's taking this or where Eric's taking this, but you wanted to talk about some ideas for not just her transition, the character transition, but also the physical, like getting from A to B and stuff. I've read all of your Pax Imperium, and you had the gate system.
Yes.
And the gate
really
system
hinders me. I still think, I know scientists, physicists jump all over me, but none of them have explained to me why gates wouldn't take 2 star systems and make local space. I have a paper to read from one of my favorite physicists who's like, read this and you'll understand why your system doesn't work. So far, I'm desperately clinging to the false belief that gates could work in a universe. I don't know. We'll see.
Don't they say that the time, if you have a wormhole, that the time on one end and the time on the other end are the same? That's the advantage of using wormhole, because there is no time dilation.
Right. That is correct. But the math necessitates, from my understanding, the geometry necessitates time loops.
Okay.
As soon as you do that. Yeah, it necessitates time loops. And I don't understand the math well enough or the science well enough and I've never had anyone explain it to me in a way that I understood it, why it necessitates time loops.
Okay.
So because of that, it'll be interesting to figure that out.
Well, let's talk about the Timcree. They're obviously comfortable using Starship technology, because otherwise they would not have gotten where they are in part 2.
I was actually thinking that their getting on board the ship was very desperate, and this is one of the things I want to reveal in part 3, how desperate it was.
Okay.
The way they got to that ship was by taking an asteroid and redirecting it, riding on the asteroid, and then launching themselves off into space and latching onto the ship as it passed relatively nearby. And it wouldn't take that big of an asteroid for 4 guys to hide on it. So it's not big enough that the fleet's going to worry about it, right?
Right.
And then you could have these 4 guys jump off it, basically.
Yeah.
And launch themselves toward the ship using some kind of jetpack, some kind of space pack kind of technology, and they latch on and then find themselves outside near an airlock and punch open the airlock and get in.
You still have to cover how they get from their planet to their asteroid, though.
Yeah, I know, right? So there are starships waiting, but I would assume that this kind of thing would be done. They want to do this. They wanted to do this very stealthily. This was not intended to be an attack, right? It was a stealth mission. This was a theft mission, a heist. Well, asteroids are going to be huge. They may not live on a planet. I'm trying to decide that, and actually, there, James, is something maybe you can help me with. Well, there are advantages to a dry world for them. You could go very Dune-like.
Yeah.
You could go a wet world, right? You could go an ocean world, which would be cool. Or you could go asteroids.
Yeah. Now, in this short story
Yep.
collection, I'm gonna call you on the carpet here. You have a story called "He Dug the Grave Himself," which involves the Tim Cree.
Yes.
So, uh, if I remember, because it's been a month or so since I've read it, they live on that planet.
They did live on Athena
Right.
sometime between that story, which takes place 230, I think it was 230 years.
Okay.
It's in my timeline.
Okay.
200 to 300 years before the beginning of the Pax.
Okay.
Somewhere between there and the beginning of the
So
Pax,
they're
they get kicked
gypsies.
off. They get
They're
kicked off and spread out all over the galaxy.
they're
So there's
gypsies.
these little tribes of these guys living everywhere.
Are they modeled after gypsies? Is that what you're going
They are
after?
modeled after the Roma. Yeah, very much so.
Okay. Here's an idea for you. Just throw that out there. Every military, including the United States and other countries, that gets to a sufficient size, they have graveyards for their old technology. So there's got to be graveyards of old starships or old ships. Think think
Oh, brilliant.
think Firefly. Mal went to a starship, junkyard and got Serenity. You know,
Right.
what's to say that the when the Pax Imperium came into being, that any ships that they retired might have disappeared or been commandeered or outright stolen.
I like it. I like it. Yeah, definitely. And they're definitely a borrower type people. I want you to be thinking duct tape and baling wire when we talk about their world. So they
Yeah.
definitely have those kind of images, which gives me an idea that I could just leave out the asteroids and the planets and all that stuff altogether, and it's just a cobbled together set of ships
Yeah.
that are just jumbled together with passages here and there, sideways and upside down, and all that stuff. So obviously you want to see that, right? I mean, you want to see that baling wire, duct tape kind of society.
Well, I don't know where you're going with the story, and I don't know what the Tim Crees. I don't know what their.
The Tim Cree are going to be the place where Joe discovers herself. So she's going to live in their culture. And to give you a hint at where they're going, I will just say, in the beginning, this is a spoiler. So spoiler alert, even for this story, right? Okay.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's all right.
She will have a major. Well, I've said this before. She will have a major role to play in the next book,
Okay.
right? So her life is at least safe.
Okay.
Everyone else is up for grabs,
Well,
but
I
she
couldn't
will have a
imagine
major role to
killing
play in
her
the next
off.
book. So
Yeah. I certainly wasn't afraid of her being killed off.
right,
You're turning a novella. You're sending this woman off to help these people, and you're not going to end it with, oh, by the way, she fell off a
she
cliff.
died.
Um,
But
yeah, the Tim Cree are interesting because I don't know long term where you're taking them. If they're only a tool to get Joe from place A to place Z, and so that she's ready for the next novel, that's fine. You don't have to go too deep into the Tim Cree. Now, if they're going to figure into future novels, I don't know. That's a tough one.
they
Uh,
are going to figure into future novels. They will be in the second novel, in a significant way.
yeah.
In
Well,
a more significant way than I thought. So one of the cool things for me is I say I'm not a discovery writer, and I'm not, in that I have my major markers out there. I know what's happened, where I need to go. I know the beginning and the end of book 2, and I know the beginning and the end of book 3.
right.
Those things I know. But there's plenty of wiggle room in how you get from marker A to marker B.
Oh,
And
sure.
and for a writer, that can be the most intimidating part. It is for me, right? Is that I know I want to get from here to here, but I have to do all these little compelling things in the middle. And to come back to plotting act 2, that is where how to get from A to B is the least clear, right? So you've had a call to adventure and a debate, and the character has chosen to go on the adventure, right? Luke, I'm going to go to Alderaan with you, right? That's
Right.
end of debate. We're moving on. And then you've got to get all the way to they escape the Death Star with the plans.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ways that you could do that. Han could shoot first. Greedo could shoot first. It all depends on which Lucas you have. But you got to introduce Han. There's all sorts of things that happen in that gap.
Yeah.
And that's where I can, at this point, get a little intimidated. So what you've given me today, and we're nearing the end, actually, we're about done with time. What you've
Yep.
given me today is that you see Jo as not knowing who she is and needing to grow up, which I think is really, really a good thing for me to remember. And probably what I need to do before I write episode 3 is spend a little time knowing what her destination is. So I need to know Jo at the beginning of the next novel before I try to write episode 3. So I can spend a couple of hours doing that. And then the next thing that you've given me today is that we can even have a cobbled together world without any planets or asteroids or anything, just floating in deep space. I still have on the table, and maybe we can finish with this. Let's come back. Let's rally back around to this. I still have a transportation problem in that my gate system, I don't know how a group of traveling Roma would ever use the gate system in my universe.
Yeah.
Because it requires permissions and keys and codes. And so I also have to spend some time, if they are mobile, how do they get their mobility? And what is it that allows them to be mobile?
They pull a Boba Fett every time.
Yeah. Sneak in behind somebody, right?
They attach to something that's going through. Somehow, I mean, then it opens up a whole can of worms. How do they attach? How do they do that without being discovered?
Yeah, but that I can figure out.
You come up with it.
That I can figure out. But, it may be that they just attach every time. And there may be more ships that are amenable to them attaching, others that aren't, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Or, there's got to be, you mentioned Han Solo. There has to be a seedy element that operates between gates, not necessarily smugglers per se, but there's always going to be transport ships that can be bribed for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And, they don't necessarily have to hook on secretively. They can hook on intentionally with, come on, here's yours. They could get an assigned list of movements between gates. They bribe somebody, and when they want to move their own little ships, they coordinate that just like any other military.
Yep. I think what's going to be really fun with them, and again, is they're going to actually find more of that available to them in the Unity, because the Unity is so corrupt that you can bribe gate officials more easily.
Yep.
Right? So the Timkree, ironically, are probably going to have a larger presence in the Unity than they do actually in, well, the Athenian space, the Allied space.
In Rubicon, you talked about, and now granted, it's not Rubicon, excuse me. In Etna, you talked about Jack's network, right?
Yeah.
Jack did not. He did not work in a void. In a void. In a vacuum,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
His whole network is spread out all over Unity, because otherwise the black market would have never worked.
That, for the first 6 years while they're on the run, has been the fly in the ointment for the fleet. In that they're hiding off in these places where Jack can't really set up a network. Right? He doesn't have the ability to do it.
But I guarantee you, there's a Jack out there who is friends with the Timkree, who knows.
Oh, and that's. There you are. So yeah, you're thinking right. Yeah. That's part of what I want to be doing with this story, is how does Jack actually get a functioning network?
Yeah. I'm a big fan of scoundrels. Any character stories that have scoundrels. So Jack could just and you could be setting yourself up for how Jack reintegrates himself into the black market. So there you go.
There you are. Yep.
The Timkree need a contact. Jack hears rumors that old Jimbo is running us a fleet with tagalongs that attach ships.
And that gives me a ton of ideas for Act 2. Yes, perfect. Thank you.
You can send royalty payments to.
No, that actually emphasizing that angle, which is one of the things I've been thinking about, is the connection between Jo and Jack, and then Jack and the Timkree, is going to be actually, I think, really, really important. We'll see how that goes. Well, I've got some ideas for it. Let's close it there.
Yeah, let's do this. Hey, viewers, let me take over from Eric for 1 cent and just promote Eric. If you've read any of his stories, please continue to go to Amazon and post reviews, whether you liked it or not. Eric wants reviews. Hopefully they're good reviews. Please also check out geekdad.com for the next 8 weeks. Eric's only on. He just finished part 2. Part 3 is coming this week. the serial story Gravelander that he is writing. It will wrap up on Geek Dad. It's a 10-week project, and then it will turn into a novella. Eric also has a Kickstarter going on to raise funds to get a cover. If you like the covers of his books, though he doesn't make these. Eric doesn't get on, he doesn't get on Photoshop and make these himself. These are professionally done covers, and they cost money. And so Eric's trying to defray some of the cost. Not all the cost. He's trying to just defray some of the cost that it takes him to produce a quality book. So if you like Eric's stuff, please consider going to Kickstarter, doing a search for Eric Wex. I'm sure your name will turn up there.
Yeah, and Gravelander is
the name of it. And please consider backing whatever you can do. He's got some really good backer levels, such as getting your name or a character, defining a character name, right?
Getting a character name, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you could put Flimblemaster, or whatever character you come up with. Dumbledore. No, you can't do Dumbledore, can you?
Probably not. We'd have to spell it. We'd have to spell it differently, like they do, like in Dungeons and Dragons, where they're not Ents, but we all know they're Ents.
Right, exactly. Well, listen. Thank you for listening in. Eric had asked me that he wanted to brainstorm some stuff, and hey, ideas are cheap. I can talk all day with Eric, but I hope I can help you out. I hope I helped you out, Eric.
Actually, you did. You gave me 4 good things that help kind of solidify the direction of where I want to go. So I have some really good ideas now.
Good.
And that actually, the setup that we're doing here is going to make the next book, Athena's Revenge, a lot easier for me to start writing, because I'm not going to have to do all this creative work beforehand. So one of the things that this gives me is an outlet to do that backstory. So it's not wasted time for the next novel, folks.
Good. Well, I'm going to let you sign this one off. Episode,
cool.
What, 16?
Episode 16. Thank you very much. Catch us next week. And as always, if you have questions, post them in the comments on YouTube.
Yep.
Thanks a lot. See ya.